Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the 31st day of July 2020, I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show once again. And up first, we've got on the hazardous weather graphics, we'll have the flood watch out there for the lower Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and still expecting heavy rains which have been occurring on the upslope areas of the western Brooks Range to the Long Mountains. Last 12 hours, some areas seen about 1¼ inches. That's going to continue. And so still a possibility of some flooding occurring. That's out through early Monday morning there for continued heavy rain. So possibility of flooding there as in the Kobuk Basin. And otherwise off to the east, the L-shaded area, that's a flood advisory for the, let's see, Southern Brooks Range, Upper Koyukuk Valley area. And that's for the same conditions, heavy rain. And there is some minor flooding going on in those areas, and that'll probably continue, or will continue, until the rain lets up early Monday morning. And from there, going to satellite imaging, you see a pretty potent storm that dropped out of the Russian Far East and kind of curving back to the northeast into the Bering Strait. And associated front, that brought back the heavier rain, as I mentioned, into the northwest part of the state. Actually, western interior seeing good amounts. Half an inch of rain in the last 12 hours fell at Cape Lisburne. And then all the way south at Russian Mission had a half an inch, as well as Koyuk. And let's see, Ambler had 2/3 of an inch of precipitation, about 0.62 inches. And rain pushed as far east, significant rain, wetting rains, 1/3 of an inch fell at Coldfoot in the last 12 hours. They're in the Brooks Range with heavier amounts back to the west, anywhere from up to a half an inch in the reports I saw on the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range and DeLong Mountain areas. Otherwise, some windy conditions as well with that. Shaktoolik River, about 1,900 feet there in the eastern Norton Sound there in the Nulato Hill areas. They had gusts 60 miles per hour, while Shishmaref had peak wind gusts at 46 miles an hour, and Buckland, Kivalina, Kotzebue, Point Lay all received 40 mile per hour wind gusts with this system. Strongest winds there in western Brooks Range at Lookout Ridge at the 2,400 foot level. They had a peak wind gust of 70 miles an hour, so pretty good summer storm up that way. And you can see the clouds over the southern Bering Sea, not quite to the Aleutians, mostly the north of the Aleutians, except farther to the west there. And temperatures, Alaska Peninsula, sunshine breaking out. Port Heiden was 75 degrees at mid-afternoon today, with some sunshine and downsloping winds there helping that temperature push up. And then band of mid and high level clouds into western Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay from Kodiak Island there. But sunshine and warmer over the eastern interior, and quite warm, hot over the northern panhandle today. Let's see, Juneau 81 degrees, Gustavus had 82 at mid-afternoon, Hoonah 85 degrees, and Haines up to 86 degrees. While Ketchikan is a little cooler down south, but Ketchikan had 74 and is lower to mid-80s over the eastern interior. Eagle had 84 degrees, Tok 81. And even some mid-70s to lower 80s Copper River Basin today. Lower 70s, the Sitna Valley, South Central Alaska, East Anchorage, and the Kenai Peninsula, in some cases mid to upper 70s, with some scattered showers. For tonight, let's move on to tonight there. We'll see the low pressure area. Let me back it up and start over. Tracking up to the northeast here by late this afternoon. It should be up to the western Arctic coast, pulling up from the Bering Strait, with the heavy rain continuing. Lighter rain along the frontal boundary down to the southwest. And then it links up to that next system out over the western Aleutians, bringing some light rain out there today. But fair, Adak, Atka, and the Fox Islands, variably cloudy. Look for an increase in the clouds there for the Alaska Peninsula as some moisture slides up, thickening up the moisture layer there, so you won't get the rain shadow effect that you saw today. So better chance of rain and some clouds with maybe a few scattered showers reaching Kodiak Island. Also a possibility of some isolated showers over the Panhandle tonight, dry over the eastern interior and mild. And now for tomorrow, that low pulls northeastward off the western Arctic coast. Heavier rain shifts eastward there, mostly to the southern slopes of the central Brooks Range, with quite an area of rain extending south and southwest along the Yukon River to the Delta. And some of that's into the Kuskokwim Valley, lighter amounts of precipitation, and showers become widely scattered for Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island area. And surges of moisture continue to come northward and southerly flow. And so the Alaska Peninsula western areas, cloudy, cool, IFR flying conditions, light rain, fog, and drizzle there. To a lesser extent on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Same thing for the Fox Islands, and periods of rain, fog, IFR conditions. But wind's not too bad there for the western central Aleutians. Otherwise, the Panhandle for tomorrow, for tonight, let's move on to tomorrow. For tomorrow, the southeast coast, you'll be a little cooler temperature-wise tomorrow than today, and maybe a few more clouds, and still just a slight risk of a shower or two, or isolated thunderstorm. Weak trough, chance of showers, Kodiak Island, mostly cloudy. No change for the Alaska Peninsula. Best chance of sunshine the Bering Sea side, best chance of rain and fog on the Pacific side. That front pushes eastward and weakens, so rain lightening up, especially back in the watch and advisory areas as early as tomorrow afternoon starts to lighten up. Next system in the Bering Sea spreads rain and increasing winds to St. Lawrence Island, but the front not too strong over the Aleutians, just a narrow band of some light rain. And that shifts eastward on Monday. The low kind of pulls back to the west a little and slowly weakens, but stays windy and wet. St. Lawrence Island, small craft advisory. In fact, gale warnings for St. Matthew Island in the forecast for Monday afternoon, or for the day Monday. And also gale warnings for the Aleutians ahead of that front as it slowly moves eastward. High pressure getting stronger by the day, and that'll continue in the middle of next week. So temperatures over the interior warm by each day. And cooler, though, only in the 60s for highs for the Panhandle, a chance of thunderstorms over toward the eastern border and up toward the north, maybe into the extreme eastern Copper River Basin as well. Then we have a frontal boundary still hung up, keeping it cloudy with periods of rain over the Brooks Range, North Slope, and the eastern Arctic coast. And it links up with the warm front for rain for the North Tack Valley, northwest coast, up to about Wainwright. And the western Seward Peninsula, best chance of some light rain, heavy for St. Lawrence Island, isolated showers in toward Kotzebue, Selawik, and those areas there. Otherwise, notice that the high pressure building westward pushes the rain back right out to the Yukon Delta coast, so drying out Bristol Bay, warmer temperatures. Same thing for Kodiak Island. And for the lows for tonight, 40s, lower 40s to lower 50s for the Arctic coast, and 40s for the Seward Peninsula. Bering Sea, upper 40s to lower 50s, mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, into the western interior, upper 50s for the Fairbanks area in the Yukon Flats, upper 40s to lower 50s, south central Alaska Copper River Basin, and looking mid to upper 50s for the Panhandle for the most part. Highs tomorrow, a little cooler there for the southeast coast. Some areas will probably push into the upper 70s, maybe touch 80 degrees over toward the border there, but generally looking at a cooling trend with increasing clouds each day and a better chance for moisture. We're still in the mid-70s, lower to mid-70s for the northern Panhandle, Juneau on up to Haines, maybe Gustavus as well. And about a day like today for the eastern interior, maybe a tad cooler for the Fairbanks area, upper 70s, but still mid-80s around Eagle, lower 80s in toward North Wyandotte. And upper 70s, lower 80s, Copper River Basin, 70 to 80 for the Susitna Valley into East Anchorage, and 60s to lower 70s for the Kenai Peninsula, and lower 60s on the eastern Arctic coast, upper 40s on the west side, and lower 60s for the inland areas of southwest interior, upper 50s to as high as mid 60s. Dutch Harbor looking for a high tomorrow of at least 65 degrees. And then for lows the next morning, mid to upper 30s there, central Arctic coast, a little cooler, and lower 40s to mid 50s, lower 40s to mid 40s for the Seward Peninsula, lower 50s for Nome, and mid to upper 50s over much of the interior, 50 to 55 southern Alaska, and same for the Alaska Peninsula, near 50 for the Aleutians, and a little cooler for the Panhandle, but still in the mid 50s up there to the north. Highs in the afternoon only in the 60s, 65 to 70, low near 60 along the coast, and upper 70s into the northern Kuskokwim Valley, with lower 70s all the way to the Kuskokwim Mountains. Even Bethel pushing near 70, and near 80 for the Yukon Flats, mid 80s again for the eastern interior. Fairbanks back into the 80s, and maybe lower 80s for the Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, and mid to upper 70s Anchorage area into the Kenai Peninsula, and 60 to 70 for the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay, with again afternoon readings see the 70-degree isotherm pushing out into the eastern Yukon Delta and Yukon Kuskokwim Delta area down into Bristol Bay. So Pilot Point, Port Hayden, if you get the winds right, could reach into the 70s once again.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, our first graphic here showing low flying conditions, Bering Sea into the western interior, and better VFR areas to the east and most of the North Slope eastern Arctic coast. But it looks like a widespread area of IFR forecast to roll into the Panhandle tonight. Marginal VFR pushing up to the North Gulf Coast, most of the Kenai Peninsula, and even into northern Cook Inlet, but not quite to Knik or Turnagain Arms, or the Madanuska Valley, western Susitna Valley, marginal VFR. But IFR there from the western Arctic coast right on down Seward Peninsula, eastern, southern, and southern Bering Sea there, Pribilos, all the Aleutians, all the Alaska Peninsula, just about Kodiak Island included, marginal VFR, Bristol Bay, and maybe Selawik Valley to Kotzebue, part of the Kobuk Valley marginal. And then for the afternoon, we'll see that, there we go, VFR, central North Slope, but IFR, eastern Arctic coast now, and the central coast as well. IFR pretty much holding out over the Bering Sea, Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta, into the lower and mid Yukon River Valley areas up to the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. And then a swath of VFR, Bristol Bay on up into the eastern Kuskokwim Valley there to the western slopes of the western Alaska Range. Marginal VFR in the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, Cook Inlet, mostly south of Nikiski. Then IFR almost gets into Kachemak Bay, southern Cook Inlet though. Looks like Port Moller, maybe Seldovia in the IFR zone. Marginal VFR kind of may get into southern Prince William Sound, possibly Resurrection Bay, North Gulf Coast. We can see quite an improvement over the Panhandle, becoming VFR in the afternoon with the IFR burning off. IFR for the Aleutians, and for Monday morning, IFR for the Aleutians, most of the Bering Sea, Bristol Bay and the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR northeastward, Iliamna Lake, right on up along the western Alaska Range, spilling into the western Susitna Valley, and northern Cook Inlet. Most of Cook Inlet marginal, southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, IFR, again just clipping Port Moller and maybe Seldovia, and then right up along Montague Island over toward Cordova, Cape St. Elias for the IFR, and then IFR right along the southeast coast marginal over the inland areas, and IFR holding there, Seward Peninsula northeastward across the North Slope, central eastern Arctic coast. And that kind of breaks up a little bit there along the Arctic coast, part of the North Slope, but IFR, eastern Bering Sea from the Bering Strait down across the Pribilos, all the Aleutians basically IFR, Alaska Peninsula. But increasing VFR now, higher pressure starting to take over aloft, so temperatures will be warming, more clearing skies. I see Cook Inlet VFR to Bristol Bay in the VFR zone, shifting westward there, right on out to the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, northward to the southeastern Brooks Range. And IFR kind of held at bay there over the Gulf of Alaska, VFR for the Panhandle. And for passes, same pattern with a southerly flow, lowest conditions, IFR southern entrance, both Anatuvik and Adigan, and possible VFR out the north side, Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional marginal VFR, slowly improving in the afternoon though. And rainy, I'll just go marginal VFR to VFR. And windy, marginal VFR in the southern entrance becomes VFR probably before noontime, otherwise looking really good with VFR flying. Isabel, VFR, Mentasta, VFR. Tanita, also VFR, and even Portage, VFR. And Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, 12,000 feet now, upper high pressure starting to gradually strengthen over southern Alaska. And then that cool pool, 8,000 feet off the southeast coast, and 12 to 14,000 feet southern Bering Sea, the Aleutians. icing, quite a swath there of moisture feeding still from southwest to northeast right into the west coast there, with considerable moderate there from the central Aleutians, Amchitka to Adak, and also Yukon River Valley, lower and mid in the Delta, Norton Sound, and a lesser threat of some icing for the Alaska Peninsula. Jet stream, southwest flow, 80 to 105 knots there, and then northeast flow, 40 to 65 knots. Prince William Sound to Kodiak Island, southerlies up to 70 knots for the Panhandle, and 9,000 feet southwesterlies, 50 knots for the most part, and the strongest band there from the central Aleutians across the Pribilofs into the western interior, 40 knots eastern Arctic coast, 20 to 30 knots there for the Panhandle, 3,000 feet southerlies, 40 to 45 knots, turn southwest and diminish over the northern interior. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop, western southwest Alaska.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there, or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out of state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so that'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis today. Still a little bit there, not much, but some leftover ice there west of Kivalina, northwest coast, but pretty open as you head north there, and still into the coastline from, for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast till you get over to roughly, Dead Horse or so in that area, and then it looks like the Barter Island area in the ice-free zone. And from there, looking at the coastal water forecasts, not too bad. Again, light winds continue over the Panhandle with very nice conditions. Will be an increase in the clouds and moisture, but still looking light on the winds, variable 5 to 10 knots over the central and southern inside waters. South coast variable to south at 5 to 10 knots, seas just 3 feet. And the north coast, southeasterlies at 10 knots, 3-foot seas. 15 knots out of the south for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay area, both Sunday and Monday. Otherwise, light variable winds continue for the central and southern inside waters, 5 to 10 knots, slight seas. And southeast winds at 10 knots for the central and north coast, along coast Prince Wales Island, south at 15 with 3-foot seas. Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, light variable winds tomorrow, 10 knots with seas at 2 feet. And Cook Inlet, light variable winds, 10 knots, 1 to 2 foot seas. East winds 15 knots for Kamishak Bay, southeast winds 15 knots for the Barren Islands. And for Monday, southwest at 10 for Cook Inlet, 2 to 3 foot seas. Light variable winds now for Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, all of the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound as well, 10 knot winds with slight seas, but a little more predominantly out of the west or variable to west there. Kodiak Island tomorrow, southeast winds 15 knots there along the east side of the island, but variable at 10 for Shelikof Strait. Otherwise, the Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories, southeast winds 25 knots, 6 to 7 foot seas. Bristol Bay, southeast winds 25 knots for small craft advisories, seas at 4 feet. Outlook for Monday, pick the winds up a little bit there, north side of the Alaska Peninsula all the way up to Bristol Bay. Southeast sustained 30 knot winds now, 4 to 6 foot seas. Small craft advisories from Cape Sarachev to Sitkinak. On the south side there for easterlies at 25 knots, southeast 20 knots on the east side of Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, northeast 20, seas at 4 feet. And for Unalaska Island, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas for Sunday, and 15 to 25 knot southerly winds For Nikolsky and Unmak Island, small craft advisories for Adak and Atka, south winds at 25, southwest 25 for Amchitka Island, north 20 for Kiska to Shemya. And from the area from Shemya to Kiska on Monday, west winds 15 knots, but much brisker winds for Amchitka Island, northwest at 30 with 7-foot seas. We got gale warnings out for Adak and Atka. South winds 35 knots, 9 to 11-foot seas. Gale warnings also for Unmak Island. Coming up to gales throughout the day and into the afternoon. 35 knots, seas building to 10 feet. Unalaska Island southeast winds increasing to 30 knots. And for the southwest coast, small craft advisory, southeast winds 25 knots, east 25 knot winds for St. Matthew Island, south 25 for the Pribilofs, and northeast 25 for St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, east winds at 20 knots. And small craft advisories for Norton Sound. In fact, small craft advisories everywhere in these zones on Monday, the exception being St. Matthew Island, east 35 knots. That's gale warning wind levels there with 10-foot seas. Southeast 30, southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, and the Pribilofs. And seas as high as 8 feet. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west-southwest 15 to 20 knots tomorrow. Small craft advisories, Central Coast 25 knot winds or 25 to 30 knot winds, Central Coast all the way down to Cape Thompson to Wales, much lighter and more variable out of the north at 10 knots. Then on Monday, Wales to Cape Thompson, small craft advisories, southeast 25 and 30 knot winds, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort out of the northeast, and the western Arctic coast, especially from Point Lay on south, 25 knots out of the northeast. Central and east side, 10 knot winds from the northeast till you get over toward Kaktovik, Barter Island, Demarcation Point. Then you're at 15 knots from the east. For tonight, rain heavy at times with a flood watch for the Kobuk Basin and Kobuk Valley flood advisory, southern slopes of the central western Brooks Range, lighter amounts north of the mountains, and rain extends all the way back into the Bering Sea and western Aleutians. Warmer over the interior, but cooler and damper over the panhandle, as you can see. It dries out even along the west coast, stays wet, Brooks Range to the Arctic coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.